sermon today is, it's time to fight. And the question I want to ask all of you today to begin is, does anyone here know the significance, the importance of March 6, 2023? What was happening March 6, 2023? Fasting prayer. Yes. So fasting prayer is just beginning, right? So that's one point of significance. And that was the day I got into a car accident. So it was actually a fender bender. I know it looks like really, really bad because it kind of was really bad. This is the day I got into an accident at work, and I called my mom, and she's like, you know, start a fasting prayer. That's why this happened. I'm like, okay, great. And if you look at this, what was happening was I was just backing out, and I will admit I tend to like overly rely on the backup camera, not always checking, you know, the other sides as much as I should be. And there was a Jeep Wagoneer, and if you've ever seen that car, it's like a tank. No one should be driving that car, I don't know, in my opinion, but the car, when I was backing out, I didn't see them, I don't think they saw me, and they hit me, and because of the size of my little Prius and comparison to a Wagoneer, it actually pushed me into the car next to me. So the back bumper, the headlight, the left door, those were all damaged, and the car next to me was damaged too. And it was like a student teacher it was his dad's car, and I had been the reason why this like poor student teacher had to, you know, deal with all this. But when this happened, I obviously was feeling really, really upset, because this is not how we imagine our everyday lives to go. And anyone here who like kind of knows me may know that I really love my car. I know it's a Toyota, I know it's a Prius. If you asked me when I was a kid, my dream car was a Camry because my dad had a Camry. So I'm not like a fancy car girl by any means. And this Prius, I had paid for it completely on my own. I had paid it off. And, you know, it's just when you pay off your car, you know, it's been a year since I paid it off, but of course, all of a sudden, something happens, right? And the next month became one of the hardest months I've dealt with in years, which should actually attest to the fact that I'm probably pretty privileged, that the fact that this was the hardest thing I ever dealt with. And every day I called insurance about my car during my lunch period. So every day, if anyone has dealt with insurance, you know it is amazing, right? Like they're so accommodating and great, right? No, they are awful. And one day I call them and they tell me, your car has been ruled a total loss. And that term, right, total loss, it sounds so extreme when you really think about it. And it made me wonder, like, what are other parts of our life that we have ruled a total loss, right? Is it your career, your car, your work, your purpose? And I got this call from them, and I was done. I was tired. I was like, okay, you know what? I'm not dealing with this anymore. So I went to the auto body shop. It's the one that my parents used for years. And I was just letting them know, okay, my car is a total loss. State Farm will be coming tomorrow, the day after. I'm just here to gather my belongings, and that's it. You're going to give up the car, and just want to let you know, thank you for, you know, they'll pay you for the days that you held it there. And at that point, State Farm offered me $8,500. So we'll give you $8,500 if you want to keep your car. And if you don't want to keep your car, then we'll give you $10,500. So I thought, okay, I'm going to take the $10,500 and I will try to buy a new car. Anyone here buy a new car somewhat recently? Like within a year? How are car prices? Are they like totally reasonable? And like, no, cars are so expensive. Dealership fees alone are so expensive. And in that moment, I just thought, you know what? I'm done fighting. I am done. I'm ready to move on. Give me a nice car. You know, I have a 2012 Prius, right? Like let me upgrade, right? And that brings me to the first point of my sermon for today. You may need to fight at your weakest point. I think for myself, I imagine that during this time where I'm in a car accident and all these things are happening, that I will be rested, that I will be ready to go, and I'll be strong and excited. But this wasn't how I felt. And we can look, the day that this was all happening, the day that I went to the auto body shop and was ready to give up, the mechanic, he may have just wanted business, but it actually was really inspirational for me. He told me that I needed to fight. He said that my car had value and that my car was worth repairing. My car was worth fighting for. And he told me that these insurance companies have been paying nothing because it's COVID, right? Or it was COVID. It's like, they have the money. They have the money. They can give it to you. You need to just fight. They're banking on the fact that you're not going to fight and that so many other people are going to just take their car, move on, and move on with their lives. And that night, I'm thinking about what he's saying, and I'm even thinking, like, this is like an important sermon. This is an important message, this idea of fighting, but I just don't think this is going to happen for me. I don't see this happening for my car or what I'm going through. And so that night, I was reading my Bible, I was reading through Luke, and this was a passage that I saw in front of me. It says, "Then Jesus told his disciples a parable," so that's a story, "to show them that they should always pray and not give up. He said, in a certain town there was a judge who neither feared God nor cared what people thought." So I'm sure my State Farm insurance agent does not care what God thinks or care about me. "And there was a widow in the town who kept coming to him with a plea. 'Grant me justice against my adversary.'" So grant me justice against this person who has wronged me. "For some time he refused, but finally he said to himself, 'Even though I don't fear God or care what people think, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will see that she gets justice so that she won't eventually come back and attack me.'" This is a reminder for us, right? And there are some important facts to consider in this passage. Why is this woman going to the judge? Is she just going for fun? Does she just want something? No, she has experienced an injustice. Something has happened that was wrong. We see this in verse 3 that says, "Grant me justice against my adversary." So a question I have for you is, are you experiencing an injustice in your life today? Is there something, somewhere in your life where you wonder where God is in that moment? And some other facts to consider is the background for this woman. She was a widow. And when we look at the Bible, being a widow during this time, she was not in a position where she could easily fight. This is taken from faithupward.org, but it says, "When a husband died, a widow was left at the mercy of relatives and the eldest son to provide for her. It would be uncommon for a widow during this time to be able to advocate, so to be able to fight for herself. Men were the ones who would do that kind of work on behalf of the families. As a widow, she was one of the most marginalized in her society. Most widows were the targets of oppression and fraud." So this woman is the target of oppression. This woman is the target of fraud, and she has experienced an injustice, and she goes to the judge the first time, and he does not relent. And I think many of us have experienced that. We know to fight once. We will go once. And then we get a no, and we give up. But the message here is that God is reminding us, he is giving us hope, that if you have experienced an injustice, that you can keep going. You keep going again and again and again. If you have experienced an injustice, and he gives us a promise, right? For those of us who go with prayer and petition, he gives us a promise. So what I wanted to do when I heard this verse, I thought this is just really convenient. It happens to be this passage, but it must not apply to me. I don't know, maybe I'll use this for a sermon, but it's not going to apply to me. And I want to take my car's value with the salvage value. It's $10,500, not $11,500. They took out my deductible, so it would be $10,500. Go buy a new fancy car, move on, give up, and by fancy I mean like a Kia. Like a Kia would be great. It's out of my price range, but so that's what I wanted to do. And what I ended up doing instead was I bought. And I think people think, and I thought, the moment you decide to fight, it's going to be easy. Like, I decide to fight, so now the second time I go and ask, it will all work out. But it does not happen like that. And I was feeling weak. I'm a teacher, September through March, no problems in this parking lot, everything is fine. And March is known as the worst week for teachers. And the reason why is because we get no breaks. And I don't know if you have the visuals there or not, but teachers in August, they're organized, prepared. Teachers in March, I have no idea what's happening. I'm prepared for the next 4 minutes. It literally is one of the hardest times in our lives. And sometimes God is asking you to fight, not when you have summer break, not when you are free and enjoying your life. He asks you to fight in that moment where you want to fight the very least, the moment where you feel the very weakest.
Yes.
And this doesn't mean like, I'm just going to fight weak, right? This means that we may have to do things to become strong. So for me, every night I was going to sleep. The next day, I'm ready to go. Made sure I had my coffee. Got on the phone with State Farm, and they probably were my most frequent caller, like the person who I called the most during that month. And in Ephesians 8:10 through 11, we see that it's okay to feel weak, but that may be a sign for us to prepare. So this tells us, finally, this is about the armor of God, the ways that we need to strengthen ourselves when we are in battle. And it says, finally, be strong in the Lord and his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes.
Hallelujah.
And part of this armor of God that I think God needed to develop in me in this time was in verse 18. It says, in addition to this, take up your shield of faith.
Hallelujah.
You need that shield of faith, trusting in God's integrity, trusting in the character of God, and knowing that regardless of what or how I hope this will work out, that God will work it out for my good. And it says, in addition to all this, take up the shield of faith with which you can extinguish all of the flaming arrows of the evil one. So in those moments when you are fighting and it feels hard and you want to give up, you have that reminder of, I know who my God is and I know he will work it out for my good.
Hallelujah.
So while I was preparing for this sermon, I was also teaching. I'm an English teacher, and I'm teaching the book Night by Eli Wiesel. So Night is a memoir from the perspective of someone who has survived the Holocaust. So the Holocaust is a genocide targeted at Jewish people, and he was someone who went through that. He went through the concentration camps, these inhumane conditions. And before any of this happened, for Judaism, essentially the Torah is the Old Testament, right? So they have like all the stories we know from the Old Testament, but they don't have the New Testament. And he was very devout. He really loved God, and he was confused as to why he was suffering. And to a little bit of context, the quote I'm about to read, the people who are saying this is the older generation, telling it to him at the time that he was put in these camps. I believe he was either 14 or 16 years old. And while they say this, they are seeing babies being thrown into fire, because the way that these concentration camps worked were that if you could not work, if you could not provide some kind of added value to them in some capacity, you were dispensable. So these men are seeing babies, the most like fragile beings, just thrown into fires. And in this moment, these men of faith said, we mustn't give up hope. Even now, as a sword hangs over our heads, so taught our sages.
Hallelujah.
This is the kind of faith I want. The kind of faith that can look disaster, can look at a circumstance in front of you and see no light in front of you, but still say, we mustn't give up hope. We mustn't give this up. We mustn't give this up, even though everything around us looks as though I do not have a reason to believe. And at this moment that they're saying this, they are hungry, they are tired, and they are physically weak, but they still have this trust and hope in God. And this leads me to my next point. When you begin a fight, you may not see the end. And I think that's why, even though I knew this was a sermon I was going to speak today, I didn't have that confidence that my car could be part of that story, because all I'm seeing is my car that is very messed up, my car that is very old, my car whose cost of repair is more than the value of the car. And one of the verses that came to me during this time was Galatians 6:9. It says, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up."
Hallelujah.
And I love this visual. I don't know if you guys could, I tried to use it in the earlier slides and use it again, but that man just looks like, oh, okay, great, I'm going to give up. And right behind him, where's all this money, right? So we don't realize sometimes how close we are to what God has in mind for us, or what the light at the end of that tunnel. And what's important here is you have to sow. You can't give up and say, okay, I hope my car works out, or I hope the situation works out. You need to sow and then trust that for the parts of your life that you can't control, that God will work out everything else. And maybe you have applied for countless jobs. Maybe you read your Bible daily and you have to draw yourself closer to Him. Maybe you call State Farm for the 50th time. And I will tell you, every time I call them, they're like, no, that's your car's not worth this. Or they would show me valuations, and then I would try to fight, and they'd say, no, your car's not worth that. And I would just continually go back and forth, showing other valuations, showing other cars that are like mine, and they continually kept telling me, no, your car is not worth more than what we offered you. And this is a reminder that the devil wants you to focus on whatever is directly in front of you. And in these moments, maybe it is your broken car. Maybe it is the loss of your job or some other setback. But faith requires you to look beyond whatever is directly in front of you. So like I said, and I'm sure you could imagine it did work out, otherwise why am I mentioning this in my sermon? Every day during my lunch period, I fought the valuation of my car. And every day they told me my car was a total loss and that they could not offer me any more money. And I wondered, is this truly what God wants me to do, to fight? Did I misunderstand this passage? Am I calling them again for, am I doing the right thing? And we look at Luke 18:5, and we see this reminder to us. Yet because this widow kept bothering me, I see that she will get justice, so that she won't eventually come back and attack me. And I'm questioning again, does God really have this passage, this word in mind for me? And if God is placing something on your heart today and you're wondering, you're doubting whether or not He will be faithful, I want to tell you today that He is always faithful.
Hallelujah.
And this seems silly, like, okay, your car, what's the big deal? But we have a God who is a good Father, who cares about the smallest details of our lives. So He cares about the car that you drive to work as much as He cares about your job and all these other major parts of your lives. And in the end, this word came to me and I felt like, oh, this sounds so corny, but this just feels like what God has done. And it says, He makes all things new.
Hallelujah.
He makes all things new.
Thank you, Jesus.
And we look at Job, this man who lost everything, right? Lost everything right in front of him. And God, he was not sure about what was happening to him, but he knew and trusted that God was faithful. And we see Joseph, who had a broken relationship with his brothers and can't see what it will look like years and years from now. But even that, God is able to make new and to rebuild for His purpose. And one day, after calling and feeling like, okay, I'm calling, I don't know why I'm calling, and researching and fighting and finding other valuations, State Farm finally increased the valuation of my car. And, yeah, spoiler alert. They still ruled it a total loss. But instead of $8,500 for the value of me keeping my car and getting repairs. They offered me $10,290, and the repairs cost $10,000. So that was enough money and then some to repair my car. State Farm, if you want the $200 back, I'll give it to you. I don't want it, you know. I tried for you to just fix my car, you wouldn't. So, and April 19th, 2023, my dad came back. My dad was part of all of this, right? Like, he was just really excited the whole time. And he's the one who drove my car back home. And when I got it, this is it now. It looks amazing. Yeah, I'm sure Prius has never gotten so much applause before. So my car is 11, except for maybe Abby. We're a Prius family. We got a Prius we have all the Priuses. So this car is 11 years old, right? And I got it 2 years ago. And when I got it, it was okay. It was nice, right? But let me tell you, this car has never looked better. The inside, they detailed it for free. They made it like so shiny. And last Saturday, I went to a friend's birthday party and I drove her home. She asked me if this was a new car. And I'm like, no, this is not a new car. But it literally was better than what I had before. And this is the promise, again, that we have when we trust God, right? And I didn't know, would it be a new car? Would it be something else? Would it be this car, right? But faith requires us to look beyond what's right in front of us and see that, again, God's nature, who He is righteous, He is faithful in every circumstance. And one verse I was reminded of was Lamentations 3:23-24. It says, because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for His compassions never fail. They are new every morning.
Hallelujah.
Great is your faithfulness.
Hallelujah.
His mercies are new every single morning. And that is a reminder for all of us today to trust in Him and know that He makes all things new, even if we feel like in the moment it is not possible. May God bless you with these words.
Hallelujah.